And we're live. Hey, everyone. Welcome to Whiskey Charlie, the War Game Chat, our live show every month on YouTube. I'm Mo from Mo's Game Table, and joining me tonight are my co-hosts, everyone's favorite Gimp with the Limp, Nate Rogers, the Gimpy Gamer. Hey, Nate.
Nice to see everybody. Hello. Welcome back.
Yeah. I didn't know if you were going to say anything else there. You were started to talk and then you stopped, you know?
The kids have been like up my butt today. I'm a little frazzled.
That's uncomfortable.
Just like literally, I just sat down trying to get focused for this, and then I had the computer problems that I mentioned to you. So it's like everything that could go wrong in a small span of time went wrong.
Mr.
Right
Murphy always shows up. You know that.
You are correct.
And the War Game Wizard from Oz, Kev Sharp from the Big Board. He's our other co-host. Hey, Kev, how's it going?
I'm good, mate. That's a new tagline. I might have to use that.
There you go. And tonight we have with us war game designer, developer, and publisher Byron Collins from Collins Epic Wargames. Byron, welcome to the show, and great to see you again, buddy.
Good to see you, man. Last time I saw you was WBC, I think, a couple years ago.
Yeah, we were hoping for WBC again this year, but unfortunately, that looks like that is definitely out now at this point. It's been canceled from what I understand. So
really? Wow, that was early, huh?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was kind of
got canceled too. Right?
Yeah, I think Origins is that one has been pushed. I think October. I think it is now with Origins, and Gen Con. There's no way 70,000 people are going to be coming out for that. You know.
Well, you kind of got to. You got to think about it. I'm having a brain fart. Who's the guy that we were talking to the other day that was talking about his deposit?
Harold.
Harold was talking about his deposit for his convention, and that he went ahead and pulled out, and he was losing his deposit. And I think a lot of these places are doing that just because they know that even if they take the chance of opening, that say WBC happened, at most, what would they expect? Half the amount of people that usually show up, and that would be a best case scenario.
Yeah,
you know,
it would be very few people I would expect flying. Because they're talking, they don't even know all of the things that are going to be in hand when it comes to flying. It they're talking all kinds of crazy stuff. 4 hours ahead of time to a flight, possible blood tests on site, facial recognition, boarding passes. I'm like, what the heck? What world did we come into now? All of a sudden, it sounds like something out of Polyversal.
Right? It's crazy.
A buddy of mine travels every week, and he said there's usually 5 people on his flight from Austin into Florida each week.
Really? Only 5?
5.
Damn. How much is the airline losing on that flight?
Yeah.
It's going to be more cost effective for people to just get small little puddle jumpers, get little Cessnas or something, and to take an airliner. They're not going to keep flying, not with 5 or 10 people on the plane. They can't turn apart. They're charging $2,000 a ticket.
Well, what's going to end up happening?
Sorry, I don't want to get,
No, I think what's going to end up happening with that is they're going to end up cutting flights down to maybe once or twice per day to different locations. It's not going to be cost effective any other way than to just everybody's going to be on one flight and that's it.
Yeah. Wow.
But so
you're probably right, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If you're running the airline, what do you want to do? You're there, you have to make money and you have to answer to your shareholders. So, I mean, and it's the only option you're going to have at that point. So there's something that we're going to have to deal with, but hopefully we'll see more and more virtual conventions until we can all get back to, playing face to face. But, with that being said, we had talked about it backstage and talk about it here to start off. We have a couple games to talk to Byron about: Spearpoint 43 series and the new miniatures game Polyversal. And with Spearpoint 43, you did a really, really cool thing, Byron. Why don't you explain to everybody in the audience what it was you did and the offer you made and all the games that you sent out?
Oh, yeah. I was just thinking, what can I do? And there's not a whole lot. We're all in lockdown and going nuts. And, I figured, well, what can be done to help, especially all the parents with kids at home want to try something different. They're all on their iPads. That's all they want to do. Video games, this and that. To get out a board game, get out a card game. A lot of these people can't or won't buy something right now, especially because everything's tight. So I said, okay, I just sent a tweet out in a Facebook post and said, hey, if anybody's got some kids stuck at home, want to try a new game, send me a message and I'll send it to you for free. And I sent out about 30. Now it's up to about 35 games worldwide.
Wow.
That's awesome.
It was fun. It was good.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. You know,
yeah,
for all the gamers, that's a pretty awesome thing to do.
A lot of people appreciated it. So I'm happy about that. So, yeah.
So Viper Dave says he's a pilot. He doesn't think that is going to happen. What is not going to happen, Dave?
What's he saying?
Saying that you have to keep flying all the cities, but only 10% of the flights are going. And Steve says back in the USSR.
Oh. A lot of people are upset with everything that's going on right now, and it's not like you can really blame them for that. I just hope it turns around. It goes back to normal. A lot of my gaming got messed up. Like I said, my X-Wing tournament got destroyed. Multiple X-Wing tournaments got destroyed. I was real sorry to see that. We were going to be defending our title, or not our title, but we had made it into the finals last year. So the Gimpy Gamer Squadron.
Well, see, if you were defending a title, you didn't have to worry about it now. You're the de facto champs because you keep it.
Nice.
No, we had a good list. We were prepared. We were practiced. We were ready to go. I'm getting distracted. Go.
And you know what's going to happen?
Have you ever played the trench? Have you ever played that trench scenario where you fly the starfighters in, the X-Wings in the trench and try and drop the bomb? Have you played that scenario?
No, I haven't. I've seen some of the guys do that on YouTube, and it looks like it was really awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
I like that. And they came up with actual stats for the turbo lasers. They have turbo laser miniatures. Sorry,
we have another co-host.
It's always right as we start. It's bedtime for them, so they want to come out and say goodnight. I apologize. Sorry about that.
No worries.
But yeah, that, and they had the big, I forget what planet they were supposed to be on, where they you know which one I'm talking about, Kev? They had set up like a ground base, and they had come up with extended ranges for all the X-Wings.
Yeah, I didn't play that one, but I've seen it played. It looks pretty cool.
Oh, so you're into X-Wing?
No, I have friends who are into it. I leech on people heavily for things that I think are cool that I don't want to spend the money on.
I play it with my kids. It's awesome.
There you go. X-Wing's good because it's relatively affordable for what you pay, right?
Yeah,
you don't have to buy all the ships. You can buy a starter box and a few ships, and you're competitive. You don't have to buy like 40K where you have to buy a huge army and you spend $500, Steve, and get close to getting started.
For one army.
I got the big Raider, the big $100 Raider set. That was so cool. It's just a big objective. I mean, it's just ridiculous, but it's fun.
That you bought just for the card, right?
Basically, yeah.
Even though now it's worthless. No,
I mean, it just looks cool.
Unfortunately.
But yeah, I mean, we don't get into tournaments or anything like that. I mean, we just have fun with it. I play. I'll search on Spotify for like Star Wars battle music and just play it on the Bluetooth speaker while we play X-Wing. So it gets the kids really into it. And they all love Star Wars, so it's great.
Right.
See, I liked it because it wasn't generic, just rolling D6s, which is actually part of the reason I was liking Polyversal, because I was refreshing myself on that before I was going to sit here and talk to you about it. And I like the way your system's set up with the different colored dice. So as a good segue, why don't you tell us a little about Polyversal there, so we can ask you some questions about it.
It's a decade of work, literally. It's been since 2009 when I first saw Ken run it at a small local convention. And what drew me to it, I was exhibiting Spearpoint. And what drew me to it was I look over there and there is a science orb inside of a Mr. Coffee maker. Like, who is crazy enough to do this? And it is really cool looking. And I went over to it. That was like a moth to the light. And I go and say, hey, what's up? And observe these players playing a homebrew set of rules called Multiverse at the time. And Ken was running the game. That's when I just observed a little bit. And what I noticed about it is everybody there had just picked this game up. They've never seen it before. They just picked it up at the show. And after a few turns, everybody was just running it on their own. And this was early original design. And there was probably 6 people playing, 6 or 7. And they didn't need a lot of help from Ken. I mean, you see a lot of games where the GM is just doing everything at a show. And this was different. And I looked at that and I'm like, wow, okay, that's really neat. And then I looked at it further. I was like, what are you using for this game? What miniatures line? And he said all of them or something like that. Because that's what it was. I mean, his kind of theory or idea behind it was he's played all these miniatures games for all these years, and all kinds of other games too. He's played a lot more than I have, and he, like a lot of us, collect just all these different ranges of miniatures. And it's like, what do you do with all this stuff once people quit playing the game? Like a good example is like Mech Warrior Clicks, and whatever else is out there that is no longer played, but there's a lot of cool miniatures or whatever. So that was kind of his ideas. No company's going to be the boss of me and say I can't use this stuff anymore, or version 2.0 is now the only one that's valid. I mean, stuff like that. And he spent all this time and money painting all these miniatures, and it's like, well, what can I do? So he basically made his own design system and put it all together and made his own little stat cards. And at the time they were like a standard playing card, to just handle stats for like over 600 different miniatures. And he would bring out a collection of miniatures, work them together into a game, and run it at a show or run it at his house. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. So we got together, we decided I wanted to play test it with him. So we went to Atlantis Comic and Games in Norfolk. We played one day. And at the end of that, I'm like, I want to take this, I want to actually publish it. And it'd be really cool. And we agreed, and he agreed. And then over 10 years later, here we are. Now we've released the game way bigger than we ever expected. And one of the other concepts that was different and unique about what we were doing is I didn't want to ever make miniatures. I don't want to make miniatures. I don't want to cast anything. I don't want to sculpt anything. I don't want to pay sculptors, designers. I mean, they're great people. I love all the work that they do, but I don't want to have a range of miniatures that are mine.
Too expensive.
They're very expensive to do and maintain and outsource even. So I thought, well, what can we do? And what I did was, before we started this path toward Kickstarter, I said, well, let me reach out to some companies that make really cool stuff and that are smaller like me. I'm a one-man company. And I reached out to people like Mario's, who's the one-man company in Greece running Plasma Blast games, making incredible models, just incredible. And Brigade Models in the UK. And at the time, Steel Crown Productions in the UK, which went under. Dark Realm Miniatures, Micro World Games, all these different small companies. The biggest one at the time was Hawk Wargames with Drop Zone Commander. Mm-hmm. And all these companies decided, let's try this. And what I proposed to them was, I want to buy a bunch of your miniatures and feature them in this system. And so that we're not just selling a rule set, we're selling a game system that has its own design system, is a playable, fully playable game, but also has base sets and expansions that feature miniatures from multiple companies, multiple lines. And that's kind of the spirit of what Ken kind of started with. And I think it continued that. And the whole bottom line is, we're now working with all these different companies instead of competing against them. So instead of we're making another miniatures game, we've got our own line, here's our miniatures, here's our game. We said, you know what? You guys are already making great product. Let's bring them all together into one game. The scale is the common factor, 6mm and 6 or 10, and it's in the case of Drop Zone. And we picked some of our favorite miniatures from each of these companies, put them into one game, and went toward a Kickstarter with that. And we showed that the balance can work, because you can use anything you want, and that was kind of proving that concept, that the game works with any model you can bring to the table. And then the idea is, okay, if you like Plasma Blast minis that we've shown and featured, or if you like Brigade or whoever, Dark Realm, go buy more of their stuff. And with the design system, and now an app as well that's free to use, a web-based app, you can create your own stat cards for any models you have. So if you have a big existing collection, which a lot of people do, from whatever, from BattleTech, from Epic, from all these different companies and games, you can still use those, and you can make your own stat card in a matter of about 2 minutes it takes to make one tile.
So Byron, I don't want to
Go ahead.
interrupt your flow there, but so it might be interesting to rewind a little bit and talk about the Polyverse universe, just to give us a kind of a sense of where it fits in kind of our sci-fi craziness, right?
Sure.
But then talk about the design system, because you were just saying earlier on, and from what I'm reading, there's a significant chunk of the rules help you do what you're talking about. Because to me, as a non-minis guy, like I said, I turn up and I play with everyone's cool stuff, right? And then I leave. But it sounds really cool that if no matter what I had in my closet, I could literally pull it out, create a card for it, and then I could bring it into my universe, and it's my own thing.
And what it is a point system kind of makes the balance between all the things that you might create versus how I might create. So we might even be looking at the same miniature, and you might say, well, that's a class 2 tank. Okay, that's you figure out what's the mobility, what's the armor, what's the technology level. You might say it's typical technology. I might call it advanced. Well, that makes an effect on the stats, but it's balanced with points. So I'm going to pay more for my advanced unit, and that's fine. So that's exactly the idea. If you see miniatures you want to use, and a lot of people now are making their own sculpts and STL files and 3D printing their own miniatures, and you can do that. And if you want to
Isn't that amazing?
particular design, print it out in 3D print it, and then make a tile for it. And some of the backers that supported the game are doing that now, and sharing their designs with us on this the Polyversal Facebook group, especially. There's a lot of active people on there, just into a lot of different angles and stories. So, I mean, so you mentioned where is our story? We have a bit of a story and a background, and Mo actually helped flesh some of that out as well early on, which is awesome. It's gritty. It's near future. It's Earth based. It's not too far in the future is where we're going with the story. And then The Expanse came out, and that reminded me so much, because it even has the Earth is controlled by the UN, and that's kind of our thing as well. But I mean, we're different, but it's similar, and I love it. I mean, I love The Expanse. I've started watching. I'm almost done with season 1. So, but yeah, that reminded me of our story. I'm like, holy crap, somebody's thinking this up already. This is cool. It was neat to watch it. But anyway, that's our story. It's Earth-based, near future sci-fi. It's, but it also will handle. It doesn't have to be sci-fi. You can use it as a modern rule set if you want to use it with modern tanks and stuff like that. Even as far back, I'd say realistically as far back as World War II, because it's very vehicle centric. So if you're looking at a M4A3 Abrams and you want to make a tile for that, then you can absolutely do that. And the weapon, the technology are going to the more primitive side, the conventional side, but you could still make that work. And there's some people that are doing this and using it as a modern rule set, and just avoiding the more sci-fi like weapons. Because one of the other things with the design system is when you're statting out a miniature, we don't tell you this is a 88 millimeter gun that's firing conventional rounds. We don't say that. We don't get that detailed. We get into categories of weaponry. So like if you're deciding that this miniature is going to have some plasma gun, okay, great. It's a category. It fits into the plasma category, and we class it. We say it's a class 1, class 2, class 3 based on the size of the weapon. So that way it's more broad categories, conventional guns, laser, whatever. And so that lets the system handle a ton of different possibilities out there now and in the future without getting too nano on this is an 88 millimeter gun. It fires at X velocity percent. It just doesn't get that detailed, but it works. So
yeah, because I mean, in the end, it's you and me throwing down some models on a table and just blasting each other, rolling dice.
Yeah.
You don't need to get into all the minutia. You can geek out on that later with some extra fleshed out fiction and stuff like that. But in the end, it really just comes down to what dice you're going to roll.
And there's other games for that. Exactly right. So the Polyversal, it's meant to be fun. And, I've thought kind of my philosophy with publishing anything, whether it's Spearpoint or Polyversal, I don't publish a lot of games because I'm slow. But Spearpoint, Polyversal, whatever, if I get something out, it's going to be fleshed out and it's going to be fun. And that's first. And I don't like it when the game gets in the way of having fun, if that makes sense. I just can't stand games like that. And I've played them, and I play them once and I get rid of them.
Yeah,
so,
you're talking about the games where you're spending more time in the rule book or looking at a player aid than you are actually throwing dice or moving your units.
Exactly.
And you're not really playing the game. The game's kind of playing you at that point. So streamline it, that's perfect. I love that idea.
And make it flow. And like, for example, along that same line, if it takes me 30 minutes to do a turn while you're eating pizza, and having, whatever fun, whatever else you're doing, and I'm sitting there at a table by myself for 30 minutes doing one turn, nobody's having fun. I mean, how can that be fun? I mean, to me, it's not fun. There's other games.
You get to watch me play.
I'm sorry?
You're getting to watch me play. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that goes into the other thing that I did like about it was the initiative phase. You're basically dicing off for initiative, and then based on, if I have if I roll, say the final number I rolls a 6, the final number you rolls a 4, I win the initiative, and I can activate 2 of my units before you activate yours. So yeah, I'm going to activate first, but I'm only going to move 2 units, and then you go. And it goes back and forth like that.
Yeah.
I was a little confused by that part, so flesh that out for me. So just like Mo's talking about, the difference matters on the roll, on how many you get to activate. So what, then the opponent gets to activate and it goes to a back and forth I go, you go system for the remainder of the...
First, it depends on how many players you have. Because you could actually have a 3-player game. That'd be cool, right?
Yeah.
2 teams, you could have 2-player, whatever. So let's just say we got a 2-player game. Keep it simple. And you've got, what you have is when you field your units, you organize them based on those hexagonal tiles. If you saw the hexagonal tiles, the center tile is your battle group commander. So that guy, that's your command unit. And he's giving orders to everybody attached to him. So physically, you see that with your hexes. And you're going to physically attach that hex as an organizational structure. And that stays in the game and can change. And it represents the actual miniatures that are on the table. So you got to keep that battle group as a cohesive force. So that's one battle group. Let's say you've got 2 battle groups, and your opponent has 3. That's totally fine. The battle group, the command unit, has what we call an effectiveness. It's kind of like a morale stat, the combat effectiveness of that unit. And what that does is it gives him
see if that shows there
a command radius for all of his units attached, and it also lets him roll that effectiveness to try and win initiative. So the game turn is pretty simple. What you do first is you take all your orders, you place them face down on all your tiles, and then what you do is you will then try to activate a battle group. So as a player, I'm looking at the table and I'm saying, okay, I want to activate my battle group with this Ensagon as my command unit that you can see there. And you hit, you grab your effectiveness die, which is color coded, and your opponent is thinking the same thing. He wants to activate one of his battle groups. So you face off with an initiative roll. He rolls his commander's effectiveness. I roll mine. And the delta of the winner is how many units that guy can activate in that battle group. So it has nothing to do with my second battle group or his second and third battle group. It's just one battle group versus one at that time in one turn. And so it's basically place orders, face off for initiative. The winner gets to activate the delta. So when you activate the delta, and it's up to the delta, you don't have to do, so you win by 3. I don't have to use all 3. I can just do 2 if I want, or 1, or I can pass. So the turn ends when both players actually pass. That would end the turn. So if I say I win activation, I pass, and then he passes, the turn's done, and you do new orders phase. And there may be some cases where that happens, but in general, go ahead.
If you don't mind, let me ask this. So when you have that, let's say we had one player that has 3 battle groups and one player that has 2 battle groups. What happens to that third battle group? Do they face off against one of the other 2? Do you get what I'm saying? So these two match up, and then you've got one player with a third battle group. Does that third battle group just go last, or are they going to roll for initiative against one of the enemy battle groups that's already rolled against one of his others? Do you get what I'm saying there?
You basically get to choose again. So basically, both players, if we get to the end of the turn, where all units that initiative have activated, you face off again. And I may pick the same battle group. If I only activated 2 units and I've got 5 in that group, I might use the same group. Or I might switch to a different group based on what just happened, or react to him. And he might pick a different group based on what I'm doing. So if he's got 3 battle groups, it's a lot of flexibility to move in another, whatever he wants to do, or try and assist this other guy that I'm attacking. So he may choose a different command unit, different commander of the battle group, and try and activate somebody in there and go do whatever he wants to do. So basically it alternates until all the orders have been revealed across all the battle groups. And if there's a couple of special things, like if the unit's out of command range, he can't get a new order, and he'll try to keep activating what he was just given last turn until he fails. So there's no activation check. So like if you're given an order and you say, I'm going to activate this unit, you flip the order over, you reveal it, you go do it for that unit. And that may be 4 or 5 models represented by a tile. So maybe a group of tanks, you go move them out and fire or whatever. And then it's your turn. Let's say you've got a couple of activations. You can do something else, or you can pass. To get through the turn, you keep choosing command units and rolling initiative and rolling the deltas until everybody's done. And now there's a couple cases that are odd, like which are rare, but it could happen if one player wins every single time. He could theoretically activate all of his units before his opponent. Yes, that's very rare that would happen, but it could. And the case there is when one player has no more orders to activate, the other player gets to do the rest. Gets to do all of his in whatever order he wants.
Have you looked at, from a balancing perspective, not allowing more than 2 or 3 activations in a row? Have you played around with that to verify that you can't like run the board necessarily if you were able to activate all your stuff, like hit an objective before your opponent does and win the game?
What I've found in games is if you're given a lot of options, like you win just by some crazy delta. Well, first, the biggest battle group size is 7. Mm-hmm. So that's the most. Yeah, you could theoretically move and activate that entire group if you won by a delta of 7. It's very unlikely you would do that in practice, and the reason is part is tactics, because you don't want to show all your cards, so to speak. Or at least what I found is you don't want to just get everything done, because then you've got no reaction to what he's going to do. So you know that he's got orders placed and he can react to everything you're doing. If you're just moving into position way forward, let's say, and moving your whole group up, and then you're done. And now you're at his mercy to do whatever he wants to do with the rest of his orders. So it's generally not wise. I mean, if you want to do it, you can do it, and you'll figure out after a couple of tries of that maybe I'll just do a couple. So it kind of balances itself when players realize that, you know, they're really not gaining anything by getting them.
So Nate has the little ones coming in, and Kev has the bigger ones coming in.
Slightly bigger, aren't they?
Just a little bit.
Mine aren't quite to that size yet. They'll be there soon enough, though. I am curious, though. So when you're talking about the battle group and you've got the hex and you've got all the units surrounding it, okay, for orders, I get all that. And it might have been the rules. I might have missed it. What happens if the command unit gets wiped out?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah.
So you've got the other hexes still around there, but there's no center. Does another one slide in and take that position?
Well, so it's an interesting thing. So we have so your battle group commander. If you lose that command unit, it's bad, right? It's a bad thing. What happens is all the units have already most likely received an order from that commander, right? They have an order that they either just executed and it's face up, or it's still face down. So if your commander just gets taken out, what happens is all the attached units immediately get stress. And stress is like degrading morale. And that's what the game is really about in a big sense, where we're not really about destruction of everything necessarily, because as that stress builds, the units will degrade in their combat effectiveness. And it'll actually drop that effectiveness die type that I mentioned earlier. It'll drop, and that's one of the 3 dice you use to roll for attack. So, and if it drops far enough and the stress remains, all those units that have that stress on there will disband. So it actually takes them out of the game. So it's pretty bad. So what'll happen with a commander getting taken out is all the attached units get stressed right away, and they're all immediately detached. That tile is removed, the command unit, and now they're all just on their own. So what do? Well, as a player, if you have another battle group commander or another command unit, you can get that guy, you can move him into range of some of these units that got detached. And what you can do is, if you have open slots, I'll call them slots, or attachment places, there's up to 6 around your command unit because they're hexagonal, then you can give yourself as a command unit, your other command unit, you can give that command unit an order called reorganize, which is an order only for him that will basically let him absorb and attach these units that got disbanded from their command unit that got destroyed. So then you only then you slide the hex tile to this command unit that just came on to pick them up, and then they can get new orders. But until then, they're still not useless because they've been given an order. And it may be assault, it may be overwatch, it may be fire for effect, whatever it is. And what they'll do is, the chaos of the game, they're going to keep trying to execute that same order until they fail in activation. And the way those guys activate, since they don't have a command unit, in the game turn, they then activate last in the turns after all the commanded orders are done. And in the order of the effectiveness of those individual units. So they'll still do stuff, but they're less.
They just won't do new stuff.
They won't do new stuff. They can't get a new order, and there's a chance that they fail to activate. And so that's the time where you get activation checks, is if you're not attached to a command unit. If you're attached to a command unit, there's no activation check. If you're not attached, if you're detached, then you have to check to do that order. And the way you do that is you roll your current effectiveness die, which may be a D4 or D6 or D8 or whatever, and you have to beat the amount of stress on your unit. So if you get 2 stress, you got to beat a 2. A 1 will always fail. But that little activation check is really tough, because if you fail, then that entire unit, which may be 2 or 3 or 4 models, will actually be given a default order called fallback, where they will actually go to the nearest cover.
Mhm.
So it's kind of interesting how that works out. It's kind of the chaos of the battle or whatever, but it works really well, and it feels like you're actually in command of these multiple groups in the game. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah,
I
it seems
like-
like you were going for something that was more realistic. That,
Mhm.
like you said, they're not going to just shoot until the last man's dead.
Right.
Stress comes into play, morale comes into play.
Yeah.
That's what
And
I
I
liked
like how
about
you're
it.
simulating that. Yeah, go ahead, Mo.
No, that's what I liked about it. It really comes down to combat effectiveness. Like you're saying, you can make units combat ineffective without even hitting them, because they could, get stressed. You could take out their leader or whatever. And you know what? You have a platoon of tanks running around out there. They're going to be like, I don't know what to do. Now, yeah, the argument can be made, and maybe in the future another rule could be added in or looked at for secondary, a sub commander, for example, like this is a command vehicle. If this one gets taken out, then this guy could take over. Maybe he takes over after some sort of other check that, he does have the morale to take over. He doesn't freeze in combat.
Right.
Then that person could be the command and kind of regroup that unit. Maybe instead of having a max of 6, he can only have a max of 4 or something, because that guy is just not as good a leader or something like that. So there are other things that you can look at, or house rule or whatever, to your own liking.
And just to clarify something that you were mentioning earlier, and for those of you who might have missed this, when he was talking about their effectiveness rating, so the commander's effectiveness rating, if it's like a D8, that's what he's going to roll for his initiative, or D12 or D6, D4 being the worst. So if it drops down to the D4 and then he takes a loss again, that's when that unit's going to rout, correct?
Correct.
Or
If
be
it would
broken.
drop below a D4. Yep. Yeah. So what's interesting about stress is you get a hit of stress, and each of the tiles has a track at the bottom, and that track shows you what happens when the unit gets hit, and whatever that damage may be. It could be stress, and stress is a big part of getting damaged. So the stress may be just it sounds minor. It's not, I didn't get immobilized as a tank or whatever. But if I take stress, and I take enough stress, it stays on the unit until the command unit rallies. And that's the only chance that you've got to remove that stress, is the commander has to try to rally that unit, and that's how you can get rid of it. But if you do nothing, if your command unit just keeps the guy in the fight, for example, those stress tokens remain. So the way it works is, at the end of the turn, any unit with at least 2 stress tokens on it will drop a die type on its combat effectiveness. So at the beginning of the game, you assign an effectiveness, and you balance that among all of your units. And when you assign that effectiveness, let's say you start with a D8. If you get enough stress, you're going to go to D6 and then D4. And if it would drop below a D4, the unit disbands instead. It leaves play. And that's the entire unit. It's not just 1 or 2 tanks. So what's neat too about that is they're cohesive fighting forces, whatever they are. If it's 3 tanks and 1 gets hit, the other 2 are going to see that because they're near each other. And that's going to apply stress to the entire unit of 3 tanks. So stress is a unit effect, but then there's also individual effects. Like if one tank gets completely destroyed, well, that also applies stress to the entire unit, the rest of the unit. You've got 2 other tanks there. They see that. They're under combat stress. And so the stress is a huge part of the game, to make it where it's not just you destroy everything to win, or you take over an objective. Like Mo said, you make a unit ineffective, you win. And you can pile on stress to command units. You can pile on stress to forward units that are harassing you or whatever, and it's going to take them out. So, it's a big
pressure is a big key, which I think is really cool. Momentum.
Yeah, I really like the system. Like I was saying earlier, I play so many war games, and so many of them use D6 systems, and it's not even just war games. I mean, skirmish games, miniatures games, all of them. So many of them have a D6 type system that I really thrive when I see someone do something besides D6. And I'm not hating on games that have D6. Don't get me wrong. It's popular for a reason, obviously. But it's really cool to see that. And I like the fact that you color coded them, so it's not just the number. You got the color codedness, so you can know, oh, well, they're red or green or blue or whatever effectiveness level they are. So you can kind of at a glance look at your hex boards when you're setting up, and you know what dice to place where, you know what effectiveness they're going to start at, and how much stress they're going to potentially take before they have to go down. So hey, I gotta try to rally these guys. That's the stuff that you were mentioning earlier about the streamlining play. It really seems like you guys did a good job on it, because I didn't overly read into the game. I sat down, went over it for a little bit, so I make sure to have some knowledge to talk to you. And I'm like, damn, I bet you I could sit down and play the game. It's not that difficult. You need these 3 dice to conduct an attack. This is your effectiveness. And just like you were saying earlier, the difference between this is how many orders you got to give out. It's just those few little rules, like what happens when your commander gets killed. What happens to those remainder units.
Exactly.
So bravo as far as streamlining. I got to give you guys credit on that. You did a good job with it.
And the CRTs that we're used to as wargamers, DRMs and CRTs, they're in this game. They're just baked into this dice system where they go up. They go up and down. You can have linked fire and go from a D8 to a D10, for example. So you can actually boost your guys up. And not only just can your guys go down, your dice go down, your dice can go up as well. So I think that's kind of neat how it's just really, it's a war game. It really is a war game, a simplified, streamlined war game that you can literally not be deep in the rules. You could just sit there and be throwing dice, talking trash, and having a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's a couple of. I think that's a trend in some games now too for the board war game community is different dice as the game as your power increases or whatever the case may be. So you might you might be using a white, green, and a red die, for instance, and then the red die is going to give you more damage than the green die, and you subtract a red die if you're firing an armor and things of that nature. So I think it's a novel idea that helps streamline play and makes things smoother and faster. It's cool.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you, I didn't see if it did or not, but the box set, the Kickstarter, does that have any terrain included with it, or is it just the miniatures, dice, tokens?
No, actually, it's just the game and the miniatures if you get a base set with battle groups. But you can order the game in a few ways. One is electronic, and you can get the rule set just for the rule set and the Arsenal app. The Arsenal app is what does all the tile making for you. It makes it easy. And that's like, it's $25 for the full game. And it's a 172-page book with the app. So it's pretty cool. But the base set without miniatures, because a lot of people have big existing collections and they don't need any more miniatures. You can get it without miniatures. You get printed everything. And that's, I think that's $75 on our site with the app and all that stuff. So then a base set with 2 battle groups, and this is 6mm. Miniatures, a fair number of miniatures. You can see on the website what's included, but we've got pictures of the different battle groups. Pretty good sized forces for 2 players to have a pretty good game, and that goes for $180 with the miniatures, and the tiles already made, so you're not spending a lot of time designing if that's not your thing. But to me, half the fun is designing units, so I think a lot of people have picked it up for that reason.
Now, I'm assuming these are pre-assembled minis?
No, these are not. These are the typical metal. You got to paint them, you got to assemble them.
So
and they're small.
What's that company I'm thinking of, Mo? The one that does a little World War II or the tank stuff? GWD, is that it?
GDW? No.
GW, yeah.
GW, Games Workshop?
No, not Games Workshop. The little metal tanks that...
I think it is GDW. I think it's no, it's not GDW. I can't think of the name of them right now, but I know you're talking. They're 300 scale, I think, or 285th or something like that. But kind of like that.
Would that be the right scale? Is that the scale I'm thinking of?
Yes, 6mm, 1/300, correct?
Yeah. So you have they're fairly small, but don't get stuck on 6mm. You can use 10, 15, 25. You can use any scale you want as long as you got the space. and you can just use the system. You can even have a small, like a 4x4 field, and use, if you just wanted to field 4 tanks aside, or even, stands of troops, and just stat out your units and play them that way as well.
There's a guy on our Facebook group that's setting this up for a modern fire team type group, and
that would be cool.
Tiles for big scale individual soldiers. It's kind of neat, making each tile a fire team. So we were just talking them through some of the stuff with that, the suggestions, but they're always just suggestions. If you want to use them, great. If not,
GHQ.
That's a cool thing. Go do what you want.
It was GHQ. That's who it was. John posted it up there.
That's the one I was thinking of. I've got a handful of their tanks, but I don't have too many of them. I don't have a whole lot in the 6mm scale, so I would be looking for the box set to go with. For me, there's never enough minis. You can never have enough. You can always use more minis.
More.
Well, you were looking at the Cav Bones, that was put out by Cav Combat Assault Vehicle. You had worked with John a little bit on, that's actually a really good scale that would work right out of the box with Polyversal.
Yeah, I've supported the Cav Kickstarter and got some of their walkers and stuff. They're bigger, but the design system is all about relative size. So if you want to build a bunch of big heavy walkers, just call them heavy or super heavy or colossal, whatever.
Gotta have a bunch of mechs.
Yeah.
Well, Kevin asked earlier, and you didn't, go into it too much for those who are not familiar with it. Kind of flesh out a little bit more of the backstory of the whole why we fight, because we're talking about the technical. Here's how the game works. Well, why are we fighting, and what's the good guys, bad guys, or the red blue in this whole universe?
Yeah, we kind of try to make it blurry for who's good and bad, and Mo and I both side with the OP4, which is opposition forces to the UN. The UN are the bad guys, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
So the UN is this kind of near future. The idea is Earth is kind of on its way out. It's kind of dying due to years of UN weather control, is what the OP4 blames it on. And basically, these groups rise up against the UN and oppose this. The UN is trying to secure like an evacuation, and they control the power to choose who gets to go and who doesn't. So it's a bit dystopian there. And they basically fund and settle colonies on Mars and fund ships to go and whatever, and go ahead of a mass evacuation. So that's kind of the plan, and Polyversal is the operation. It's Operation Polyversal, and the idea of that is the way they do that is not physically moving people; it's copying. So technology is built. The pioneers, we call them pioneers. The ships have to go to whatever they're settling. If it's, I think we said Mars. They set up colonies, and they set up these receiving units. So we're in the era of 3D printing, and we're 3D printing now. Even now, we're 3D printing skin and organs, and what's next, right? A fully printed organism that's coming, if it hadn't already been done. And so that's kind of the idea with Polyversal is the UN basically tells you, if you're chosen, to show up, and you basically get scanned using this scanning technology that then sends and reassembles or builds you in a new form over at the evacuation site, whether it's Mars or some other colony or whatever. So we called it Scan Fab. That's the technology. And so yeah, the UN controls that. And so the OP4, the opposition forces, are more like the freedom fighters and believe everybody should be included, and or whatever, or they are trying to control the technology or gain access to it, whatever the motivations. And there's a a series of fictional scenarios that we're going to walk through and include a release a little bit later. That's going to be 18 scenarios that kind of tie that story in to the game. And it's going to set up different battles between the OPFOR and the UN and a third group, mercenaries, which will fight for either side. But it's kind of interesting. I've gotten into, we have a bit of the fiction in the intro to the game, which is in the first part of the rule book, to kind of set the tone. And then our units in the game are either UN, OPFOR, or mercenary. Those three factions. That's how we've started. And yeah, like I said, either side could be good. Any of the three sides could be good or bad. It just depends on really who you want to play. So yeah, that's a little bit of the storyline.
And where it's blurry, with the cool part that's blurry is, like Ken, the designer, he's a UN sider. He sides with the UN. Me and Byron were like, we're up for, screw you, UN guys. But Ken gave up, we're all discussing this, and he gave some really good reasons where the UN is good and where they're doing it for good and the preservation of the human race, which sounds noble and all. But then you look at it from the OPFOR side, it's like, hey, well, you're only selecting a certain percentage of the populace to do this. And then there's the question of, are you really moving them to Mars? Is this population control? And there's a whole bunch of different ways you can go with the story. And the coolest part about it, which I thought was neat from talking to you about it initially about four years ago or so, was there's so many, branches of the tree to explore, and you want to leave it to the fans to write their own fiction and be involved in constructing the universe.
Right. Have you guys seen the Galaxy's Edge book or read the Galaxy's Edge books? It started out as a riff on Star Wars, and then the entire backstory has really been written over the last few years, but it's all about the departure from Earth and the selected who end up on the ships that doing the slower than light transition from Earth to some planet somewhere.
Right.
Faster than light travel is discovered or worked out while those guys are off doing their thing, traveling. And so they end up beating all these people to the new planets, and they settle them. And then in come these guys that bad things happened, right?
Oh, wow.
Really bad things happened on these massive colony ships when they were in space for 1,500 years. This Polyversal thing would play so well into that too, because just the backstory and lots of galactic battles and conquest of planets and things. It's very cool.
That's called Galaxy's Edge, you said?
Galaxy's Edge is the series.
Wow.
If you dig into it, Cole is one of the authors. There's a team of authors, but Anspach and I think it's Nick Cole, and I can't remember the other guy's name, but really good series of books. First couple were kind of cheesy, kind of rip off of Star Wars, and then it was like, okay, now it's really what we want what Star Wars should have been.
Yeah.
Then a massive backstory. There's probably 6 books on the backstory that are 10 times better than all the stuff I read originally that came out. Anyway, I'm diverting from the conversation here, but the universe would be wonderful to explore with your game system, I think.
Sure.
Were you trying to say you didn't like the new Star Wars there, Kev? Can't really blame you.
Can't say anything about Star Wars. My goodness.
The only good thing from Star Wars recently has been The Mandalorian. We all know that.
Baby Yoda.
Yeah, Mandalorian. No, I was going to say, though, that your storyline was making me think of the show on Netflix, Altered Carbon.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, same here. I thought the same thing.
You haven't watched it yet?
I haven't watched that yet.
Yes,
Oh,
I
dude.
messaged you about that a couple years ago. I was like, you got to watch Altered Carbon. This is Polyversal.
I purposely didn't watch it because I'm writing fiction for Polyversal, and I don't want. I'm influenced. Everybody's influenced by everything they're seeing, hearing, and watching. But I don't want to see such a great idea on that show, and then like, oh man, I really want to use that, and then you know what I mean. I want it to be from my head and not.
We won't say anything about that show then.
That's
What show? What are you talking about?
you're right
All right,
though.
now
I
I'll go
mean,
watch
they've got the similarities. The fab thing that you were talking about, the 3D printing a person,
Mhm.
that's in the show. They do that very, realistically, like you would kind of expect them to do it.
Nice.
If we got to that level of technology. Now they're way far in the future. It's like 2600 something, whatever.
Yeah.
In their time frame. I don't know what time frame you guys are set in, but I know it's like near future. Not
We're saying like 2090, like this 2090, 2094, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Is what we
I
said.
could still be around for that.
Yeah, never know. I mean,
The old
look
truth.
at how much things have changed in the past 50 years with technology.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, where are we going? Who knows? But I don't think we're.
Heck, 10 years ago, no one would think that you'd be able to print out a whole army of mechs or tanks or anything in your own house.
Right.
Back then it was you'd have to cast it. Now you can just print it. And in 10 years, what are we going to be printing? Hey, I need a prosthetic for I lost my hand. Well, I'm going to print one at home tonight. I got a better file. I think this is going to work better and print your own.
Exactly.
Well, you know what's going to happen with that first. If that technology actually happens, mankind's not going to be printing hands and eyeballs first. Think about it.
Too much
how
money
many
to be
decades? No, how many decades has Viagra been on the market? It's been like what, 90 years or some shit. It's been around. There's a focus for mankind before they start going into the altruistic stuff.
So, we've talked a little bit about Polyversal. Now, anytime there's a question from the audience, so you guys know to chime in with a question. I mean, we had a couple earlier. There was one with the ideal scale was, you had mentioned 6mm, and then we talked about, any, scale is going to work fine. Let's talk a little bit about Spearpoint 43, and is there anything new with that? Anything else you're going to be developing with that, or it's a sequel to? For those who are not familiar with Spearpoint 43, talk a little bit about that game as well.
So right now it's a 4-game series. The original came out in 2010. It was US and German. It's a quick card game. It's fun. It's light. It's dice. It's cards. It's a little bit of a deck building element where you can create your forces, your opponent creates their forces, and you just have fun with it. Play about 30 minutes and the game's done. So it's light. Expanded that with a terrain expansion called the Village and Defensive Line map expansion. It was too long of a title. In fact, Kevin Sorbo actually called us out on that because I got a Origins Award nomination for that game back in whenever, and he was at the award ceremony reading off all the titles of everybody who was nominated for each of them. This was historical board game category, and he read mine. He's like, Frontline General Spearpoint 1943 Village and Defensive Line map. It's a really long time. I was like, oh man, Hercules just told me that my title's too long, and whatever, and I didn't win, and that's fine, but it was cool to just be nominated. But yeah, that's a terrain-based expansion. You use the same cards, same mechanics for combat, and it expands it a little bit into more of a miniatures feel. Really, it feels like more of a miniatures game. I don't know, Kev, you've played that. I don't know if you'd agree, but
it gives that adds more theme to it too. I think you got the
deeper
and placements and the village and all that sort of good stuff. I think I liked how it added became richer. It's better than just putting cards down on a table.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So that was the expansion. And then we did I did Eastern Front, which was a bit more refined than the original card game. Cards and dice again. Another standalone set, uses the same rules. Both base sets use the same rules, but completely different cards and quality now to the crews. So the crews actually were green, regular, or veteran, which had an effect on where they're placed. I mean, if you're putting a veteran crew into a tiger, it's going to perform pretty well versus a green crew. And there's a lot of, it's the same system, but then I added, scenario cards and walked through basically all the battles or in my mind, what would kind of simulate Kursk, for example, in 43 Eastern Front. So there's scenario cards, 12 scenario cards that walk you through different setups and some battles there. So Eastern Front was well received, and it got a at the time it was Grogheads did a Reader's Choice Award, and it got a Reader's Choice Award, which was awesome.
Nice.
Which is cool because that's people voting on it, so I was pretty happy with that. People like it. And then at the same time, we did the heavy weapons expansion for Eastern Front, which is additional Soviet German cards. Some of that more support equipment type stuff that you can add into your decks. So that's Spearpoint. It's light, it's fast, it's fun. It's a card game at its core. Streamlined. Again, I like streamlined stuff, so it plays quick. And I like non-D6 games as well, so there's D10s.
Yeah. Good
choice. Yeah. So future of that, Mo, you asked. So one thing I want to do, and I started, was a Napoleonic version of Spearpoint, which would be pretty cool.
Nice.
Still trying to flesh that out a little bit. Polyversal comes first before anything else, new projects, but that's one thing I want to do for sure. I think it would work really well. And each of the decks would be like a different country, in Napoleonic times. So similar mechanics, but obviously matching those times and that weaponry and those infantry. So that's an idea that I'm potentially doing. And I wanted to do a Cold War version as well. And actually we started down that route and called it Spearpoint 1987. And it's kind of fizzled out twice. Once was with designer Jim Day, who did MBT games. Jim's a great guy and everything, and I talked to him about it. And he said, "Yeah, I'd be interested," because he did MBT, and I'm thinking, "Wow, I should ask this guy." And yeah, we got into it, and then it's just like I think we wanted to go maybe two different directions, so we stopped working on it. So then I picked it up with my friend. I'm friends with Mark Walker, and Mark Walker at the time it was Lock and Load. Before he got out of Lock and Load or sold the company and started Flying Pig Games. So in that transition, we kind of stopped work on it, and also Polyversal just took over everything for any current future projects. I mean, it's just so massive to try and get this thing done that everything else was put on the back burner.
Polyversal became Solo-versal at that point. It was the only thing you were worried about.
Yeah, still.
Now that Mo said that, can I ask a question about Polyversal?
Yeah.
Is there a solo mode? Are you going to implement a solo mode? Have you thought about it at all?
I mean, I've done a lot of testing solo. I mean, really, just in the development, you have to, because you just don't always have opponents. The thing that would be open about it would be the orders. I mean, the orders are hidden. So if you've got 2 or 3 players, then of course strategies are going to be different between me and you or me and Mo. But you lose that face down orders part. But other than that, and just kind of, I mean, it's hard to play a solo. It's hard to play solo on a game that's meant to be 2 or 3 players. So it's definitely best with at least 2 players. But you could do it. There's no real official like solo mode or solo variant, and I don't think there will be. But you could certainly roll out combat.
You could give one-sided doctrine or something like that, right? You could give the UN peacekeepers a doctrine. It's kind of like the Soviet doctrine or whatever the case may be, and
you could
have them behave in a certain way.
Sure.
And also based on posture, things like that.
Yeah, depending on if you're attacking or defending or meeting engagement or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of similar to Nations at War or World at War 85, that it has a solitaire deck that it operates on. Depending on AI, the aggressive cards or the defensive cards mixed into the deck, whether they're on the defense or attack, just depending on what the mission is. And I have seen some skirmish-based miniatures games pull off solitaire fairly decently, like Fallout Wasteland Warfare
Mm.
did well with it. And I'm just now poking around with Agents of Mayhem, their solitaire component, which is in a prototype form right now. But the difference, though, with those games is you're right. They don't have the hidden information, which is a little bit different with Polyversal. I don't know. I might have to poke around at Polyversal a little bit, see if I can come up with a good solitaire mode for that, because I like the sound of the game. I love the way everything works. But my primary thing has always been solitaire war games.
Yeah.
I think you can use something like that AI deck that's out there. That you can again pick. I would say pick a doctrine and pick a posture, and then go with the deck. And then obviously, if your AI deck or whatever you choose says do this, and be like, well, that would be suicidal and stupid. Does it fit their doctrine? Well, yeah, it does. Okay, do it. If it doesn't, let's do it. Let's do the second thing. Let's not do that, because no commander is going to do that unless they're a nut. Now I'm the type of guy that would say, yeah, let's run up the gut. Full steam ahead, damn the torpedoes. Let's just go for it. That's why I'm usually out of a game in 30 minutes.
Well, one thing I love about the Polyversal system too is that your base package, the $180 package, you get a lot of stuff in that, like a lot of minis in that. It's what 40, is there 40 minis in there or something like that? I was just looking at the package.
God. I would have to.
It looks like a lot.
It's a fair amount.
Yeah.
So each battle group is. Let me just check myself.
Yeah, then the expansions seem pretty reasonably priced as well. So, it's one of the challenges I find with minis systems is they become very expensive because you're always going to want all of it, right? Because it's where complete is. But your Texas Militia I see here, and some other UN expansions and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, that's okay. Well, that's $50. That's $70. I could do that, right? So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. The base set. You're right. Each battle group is pretty big. In a point scale, it's 750 points, and you could take that group and just put it out on the table, and your opponent can do the same. So one group, I'm just looking at the number of minutes. You get 20. So this UN quick reaction force in the base set, there's 24 infantry, 4 basically recon vehicles, 3 grav MICVs, 3 Ocelot light grav tanks, 3 heavy grav tank or 3 heavy tanks, 4 walkers, 3 VTOLs. So it's a fairly good force right there. And then you've got you're out 4 Minutemen. Similar, they've got 24 infantry, 3 missile trikes, 3 Rutels, which are like a wheeled tank, 4 Ketros, which are like an MBT from Brigade, and then 2 sets of 2 walkers. One is big and Siafu from Microworld, and the other is a drone missile from Microworld. And then again, 3 VTOLs. So you've got a matching opponent with the VTOls.
The Dragonflies. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So I remember. Do you have offboard as well? I can't remember now off the top of my head. Is there offboard artillery, things like that? Support fires?
You could maybe. No. There's no real rules.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I couldn't remember. I didn't think there was, but I couldn't remember off the top of my head if there was or not.
No, like we thought about like orbital strikes and stuff like that. It's like no.
Well, you're keeping the fighting localized. You're not having it necessarily on a big, operational type of scale. Right. It's more of a, this is local skirmish scale almost. A little bit bigger, obviously, but it's more localized.
Maybe a city.
Yeah.
Or whatever, a few blocks of a city. That's your fighting area. Yeah, it's not that scale to where. Orbital strikes, that'd be fun, but would it? I don't know. I don't know.
You can always add in, something.
Nukes, so,
you can have nukes, but I'm talking like artillery, just mobile artillery, things like that, and you can even add in turrets. If you're attacking a city that part of the city's defenses, they have turrets or something like that.
Well, the 6 mil scale is nice because you get a mass feel with those tiny miniatures, right?
Yeah.
So if you look on a city scale, and you've got several blocks, like my terrain is several city blocks or whatever. There's artillery on the board, and there's orders to match. So We don't even really need to go off board because within the game play area, we're using artillery.
Okay.
Oh, so I have a question. How big is space? What's the minimum size table I need? 6x4 to play? What do I really
It's
need?
really just recommendations. I mean, you can go small if you really want. I think it works best for a play area of like 4 foot by 6 foot. I like that.
Okay.
4 foot by 4 foot is fine too. I've run some games at conventions 4 foot by 4 foot, and they're fine. 4 by 6 I like a little better, a little more room to maneuver. The smaller it gets, the more you want to break up line of sight with buildings and terrain and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, I imagine it's pretty deadly. So,
See, now this is what you have to look forward to, Nate, as you get a little older. You know, John says, solitaire, I'm just old and do that all the time. I forget what I did 5 minutes ago. And yeah, it's true. I mean, it's really easy. The older you get, you're like, yeah, that's a great plan. Yeah, that's going to work. And then you go to the other side and you're like, I wonder what he's going to do. I forgot what I was going to do over there. You know, so it works really well.
You got to remember, Mo, with the brain injury,
That's true.
I've been there for years, man. My memory's shit.
So there you go. Yeah. Now we had a question here about how tall in general are 6mm miniatures, and I don't want to be that guy to say 6mm, but
well, the height of a infantry would be 6mm.
Yeah.
So I think typically, right? Is that how you meant?
Yeah.
That's correct. Yeah. Height of a man.
Yeah, that's the height of the man. The infantry would be 6mm, and then the vehicle would be 6mm scale, which would be just hold up a 6mm infantry guy next to a vehicle, and it should look in scale to us next to a truck or car or tank or something like that.
Yeah, if you're used to like 28mm scale minis, like the miniatures, the 6mm scale should be about the size of like up to their knee or thigh or so.
Mm-hmm.
So about that big. If you play with those that level, that's the ones I'm used to.
They are small, but I like it because they're actually easier to paint. Believe it or not, everybody thinks, well, they're so tiny, I can't paint them. Well, you don't have to get super detailed because you can't see them anyway. So you just wash over them and do a few highlights, and you're done. You know, it's kind of nice.
Matt's asking
someone.
What's that? Yeah,
I'll be paying someone.
Yeah.
Matt says, how tall is that in American? 6mm. No, it's probably I think a little less than half an inch, if I remember correctly,
that
somewhere
sounds
in that
about
range.
right.
Yeah. And then we had a question from DCB. Says, Byron, were you planning on going to Historicon? Do you attend the other miniatures conventions?
I do. Historicon's canceled this year, but so no, I was not going to go this year. Back when it was in Virginia, I went every time it was here. It was great, and they moved it back to Pennsylvania. I haven't been back since. It's just further to travel. It's a little bit different because it's more on the historical side than sci-fi stuff like Polyversal. Sure. What I've found is Adepticon is my favorite sci-fi mini show, and I've gone 2 years. I would have gone probably this year, but it got canceled as well because of the pandemic. So Adepticon, definitely, I want to go back there. I've been to Gen Con with this one time several years ago, and it was just too much. I mean, I've been to Gen Con twice now, and it's just too challenging. Logistically, it's very hard to do as an exhibitor. And then you're competing with every other exhibitor that's ever existed for that year. And, you know, it's just tough. I mean, there's just so much to see and look at. Yeah, it sounds great. There's 60, 80,000 people. But that's also the negative part. There's 80,000 people. And, you know, they're not, believe me, not all 80,000 are coming by your booth. Most of them are going to specific places. They're all scattered. It's Gen Con. I don't know if I'll be back, honestly. It's tough. So I like the smaller shows. I like shows like Adepticon. I mean, Adepticon's actually pretty decent size. Historicon's fun, but it's just not the genre for pushing Polyversal.
WBC.
WBC is fun. It's just more board games. So it's, you know, but I'll go to WBC and exhibit Spearpoint and have fun with that. And in fact, last 2 years ago, whenever it was,
Yeah.
One of the fans of Spearpoint actually ran a tournament of Spearpoint 43 at the Eastern Front, I think. And that was
So
fun.
when you go to those tournaments, when you go to those shows, obviously, and you have a stand, obviously you're hoping to spread the word, but sell product as well. So how successful are they for you, given that you're probably a tabletop there, right? And a drop sheet behind you. How does that work for you? Is it good?
I'm a 10 by 10 most of the time, 10 by 10 booth. I've expanded sometimes into bigger.
Really?
It's like Adepticon, I did a 10 by 20. I think it was 10 by 20. No, 5 by 20. And that was really good because I could spread out my modular city terrain across. Basically, I used about 18 or 20 feet. And my buildings all have fiber optic lighting. I mean, it draws people over. So one minute a lot, people are coming over. Just like Ken drew me to his table with the Science Orb and Mr. Coffee. I've got fiber optic buildings now. So, it's come back around full circle. But yeah, Adepticon is awesome. It's fun. Yes, it works. It brings people who've never heard of the system come, and then you get to meet media people too. I mean, people like Mo, and I met Mo at WBC one time, and he's always giving good coverage. Jeff of the Gaming Gang. I mean, there's a lot of good media people that come around and help spread the word too. But you see them at the shows. You get interviewed at the shows. Even Board Game Geek did an interview of me at Origins one time, which was awesome. And
I was watching that the other day.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's hit or miss. I mean, you never know. And what you'll see is some crew will come by and they'll have camera equipment and say, "Can you do a quick thing?" I said, "Yeah, definitely." Adepticon was great for that with Beasts of War, which became on tabletop, and Gianna Lomax has interviewed me both times I've been there, and their team, and that's and the last Adepticon, I actually had a beta version of the app for Polyversal that Carl Olson he's the programmer, and he was just finishing up the prototype of the app. We hadn't even released it or shown it, and I showed it on camera for the first time at Adepticon. So that was really cool. And a lot of people saw that on the video blog that they did, and they started looking at Polyversal. They said, "Wow, this looks cool." And, it was a lot of positive comments and stuff like that. So yeah, the exposure is very good, even as a one-man company. Logistically, yeah, it's hard. I mean, it takes me away from the work. But.
So let's circle back for a second and talk to me about fiber optic buildings. Where did you get those, or did you make them yourself, or what are they? Where can I see them?
Should send some photos, Mo. I think there's some on my Twitter.
I think I was going to see if there are any on the site here.
You've got a Twitter page? Oh my gosh. Where have I been? Is it Polyversal, or is it under your
CE Wargames?
CE Wargames.
Yep. So if you click on that, go to media, and somewhere there's going to be some city terrain and some lighted stuff. And they're also
what's it called again? Can you repeat it?
CE Wargames.
Oh, CE Wargames. Okay.
And the funny part is, it's not just you two. It's like everybody in the chat is right now too. Switching over to it.
So it's the way I did that. The buildings that I lit up are from the Phalanx Consortium, and they were one of our partners for Polyversal Kickstarter. They actually made a spaceport as an exclusive terrain piece to be included with the Kickstarter. So Phalanx makes these pretty awesome foam resin buildings. It's a cast foam resin. They're very lightweight, very durable, and they're huge. They're skyscrapers. So I like the scope and the scale of them. And then what I did basically just is went on eBay, got some fiber optic kits. You can get them with LEDs and little battery things and the fiber, and you just run the fiber. You drill holes through the building, and then hot glue the end of each fiber at the end of every hole. And then you run them all together into an LED, and one LED with the 9-volt powers the whole thing and lights up the whole city. And it looks really cool, especially at a convention. So yeah, you'll see some. If you see convention photos, it'll probably show up there. Like probably in the March timeframe of last year would be Adepticon. They would definitely have some. But yeah,
I gotta ask, like, doesn't it worry you a little bit, or have you ever had the problem when you're at a convention like that and you've got all your cool minis and everything set up that people come up and get handsy with it? Doesn't that worry you a little bit? Because it would be driving me nuts if I put all this effort into it and people.
They're all Kens.
They're all what?
They're all not. They're none of them are mine. They're all Ken Whitehursts. So people come up and I say, "Go pick them up." Yeah, see how.
Yeah,
they
go play with it.
But
that
all
would
the
drive me nuts.
yeah, no, it's especially kids. Kids will come up all the time at shows like Adepticon and they'll want to turn a tank turret, and I don't say, hey, don't touch it. You know, I mean, they're so interested anyway, and they're just curious, you know, and it's fine. You pick it up, it's fine. We're playing with model toys, you know, it's all good.
Right.
And if they break a turret or something, then I'll put some glue on it or buy another one. Big deal. But yeah, no, I don't worry about it too much. Generally people don't pick up the buildings. But yeah, we'll have some handsy people, and it's cool. Some people just want to feel what they're about to buy potentially.
The other thing too is the art. Bruno Wernick, he did a great job on this art that just sucks you right into this universe here. I think it's just really, really
Bruno
cool.
and James.
Yeah.
Yeah, two artists.
Scroll down a little bit further. There's a picture. I'm sorry.
I like that.
Yeah.
No, keep going.
So
Keep
that's
going.
from James Messino. But yeah, every tile has amazing sci-fi art. So if you like sci-fi art, the game is full of it, and it's got just every piece I wrote the commissioning narrative for, to depict what are we trying to show with this model, and each one of those told a story, which was really cool, I thought. So each one of the tiles has, just like there's one of the Pioneer ships that James did. That's one of our storyline pieces that's in the rule book. But yeah, the art is incredible. I'm really happy with how all that turned out. I hired Bruno Wernick, who worked on Tron Legacy.
Way too much time on your hands right here.
Yeah, I got really, I started to go crazy. So I spelled Polyversal out with thousands of lit code bases.
Oh, there it is.
There you go.
There you go.
There's the building.
Yeah.
That looks awesome.
That does look pretty cool.
Yeah,
really like that
it does capture your eyes, especially at a convention. So it brings people over, and then I can demo the game and show what it's all about. So,
and see, the good part with Polyversal too is that with it being the smaller scale like that, you can print the buildings if you have your own 3D printer.
Sure.
Relatively easy. I'm sure there's plenty of files on there, because I've printed so many shanties and walls and debris for my 28 mil type games. So I'm sure I can find, terrain that will work for this that I could easily wire if I needed to.
Absolutely.
To do the lighting with, but it'll be easier and less plastic intensive since it's a much smaller scale to deal with.
There you go. Some more in the dimmer light here. You can see the lights over here, and then the floodlit building over there. That's pretty slick.
Yeah, those are Phalanx models. Really cool buildings. They make great stuff. They did their own Kickstarter called Neo Tyrannus Cityscapes, and they do. Chris Bennett has done some really cool designs, and I was happy to work with him on featuring some of those. So originally they would have been part of our Kickstarter.
There we go. That's WBC.
Yep, that hat. That's how I knew it was you.
Yep.
Yeah. I think I'm wearing the same shirt. That's just.
I hope you washed it since.
I was going to say that WBC was a couple years back, man.
Yeah, it's times are tough, man.
Is that the one I met you at, Mo?
Yeah, you were there. And this is his booth, and you can see Mark's booth is back here, Flying Pig in the corner.
Yep.
And Lock and Load was way down to the other side.
Right down over there. Yeah, I remember filming that booth.
Yep.
Damn.
Cool.
I think it was busy when I came walking by, so I got some footage, and I never made my way back over there. Mo, you should have drugged me over there, bud.
There you go. And here's a look at Spearpoint in action.
There you go.
Oh yeah.
And was also at WBC as well. So yeah, a lot of good stuff. That's why WBC
so
is so much fun.
Spearpoint, is it just 2-player? Or was that a 3 or
That
4-player?
was. I think they were maybe playing a 4-player game. You can do a 4-player variant with Spearpoint, yeah. But it's meant for 2. 4 players, you can divvy up the cards, and what I like to do with 4 players is, let's say you and I are both Soviet. I would have the frontline units. You would have the support units.
This guy's deep in thought right here.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, I'm so screwed.
Yeah. And then so you can do team-based 4-player. That's probably the best way to do it, is team-based 4-player. And you just expand, and you have your own deck. Your teammate has his own deck, and as you play, you're working together. So the gist of it, and it's written out in the Eastern Front rules set.
Sounds kind of similar to Upfront.
It's a lot of people said, isn't this like Upfront? And yeah, there's similarities because it's a card game. I mean, Upfront was a card game a long time ago, but I would say a lot more complex Upfront, and it's still simple, but it's in a great game. But the rule book's huge. I mean, if you look back at the rule book for Upfront, it's 40-some pages. I'm like, wow.
So here's one. Here's one that you can maybe address here for John. He said, I find it very interesting, Polyversal, and will pre-order, but all the options are very Kickstarter-like, so have to read up on the difference between original rules, Balkan Cruise, and the Texas Militia. So maybe you can, if there's anything specific, John, that you have a question on, Byron's here. You can answer them for you, or maybe Byron can just address it.
What I would recommend is this. If you want to check it out, grab the electronic rule set. And it's $25, not a big investment. And what I do is, if you want to change that out with a set that has miniatures, printed goods, printed rule book, all that stuff later, then you get that $25 credit toward that. So if you decide to upgrade it, then you just pay the difference. So I would recommend that, because you can get the electronic rules, read them up, see if it's a game for you, get into Arsenal. Arsenal is really cool. That's the app that Carl Olson did that helps you design the tiles, and just play around in it. And it's pretty self-explanatory and free to get into, make an account, whatever. And you can start designing right away. So yeah, that's my recommendation. Just grab the e-rules, check them out, read them up, and see if it fits what you want to do, and then go from there. If you want to get some miniatures and stuff like that, it's totally cool. You can just email and say, hey, I'm interested in upgrading.
You know, the funny thing is, Kev, you were just posting in the military sci-fi group about, the rules for Polyversal. Said, nice, Mike Grab. And Ken responds, thanks, Kev. Happy to answer any questions you might have. I don't know if he's aware that we're in here tonight, but he's the designer of the game. And, that was one of the things that we had talked about a little briefly. And this is something that you can address, Byron. And it's applicable to any, whether it's miniatures, a war game, a Euro, whatever, a game, is the challenge of the designer designs game. And then you as a publisher and the developer, what do you face as far as, the challenges you face, and wresting control of that from the designer and trying to change things up that, the designer has this idea, but then you go, that's really not going to translate as well into a game as you think in your mind. And from a publisher's perspective, you go, well, we also have to keep the costs reasonable. So, address some of the challenges you face there.
Yeah. I mean, any game, any designer, any publisher designer relationship, Mark deals with this too. We've talked about it before, is, there's you have to work with your designer, of course, and you say, hey, I want to publish your game. And a good publisher will develop that game before he just takes the design and puts it out. And I think most of the people that I know all do that. Uwe Eichert, Mark Walker. I mean, I know a fair number of publishers that do really good jobs with development, and they'll take that initial design and they hone it. They help it flesh out and really become a playable game that anyone can pick up and understand. And that's a big challenge. So when, like, the example with Ken that you mentioned is, Polyversal, he was running the game at local convention or for himself, and that's completely different than writing it all out and giving it to you, Mo, to go read it and go play it yourself without any instruction, without any guidance, and whatnot. So what'll happen a lot of times, I think, with designers is, they have the game done and it's in their head. But when you say, okay, well, write it down, that's really difficult to do.
Right.
And clearly, so it's very hard. And to go do that takes a lot of time and effort. And even when I thought we were done, I actually posted a draft of the rules to all the Kickstarter backers, right? And this was, when I was ready to present. I said, we need to get it in front of more eyes, because I had hired an editor, Michael Kozanarski, did the editing. And he initially, I was good with it. Ken was good with it. And then the editor's like, hey, your organization's all messed up. You need to put this section here, this section there. You need to change this wording. This doesn't make sense. And he was looking at it not from a player's perspective, but just from an English perspective. How is it written? Does it make sense? So that helps a lot too, is get an editor to look at whatever you're doing as a publisher, as a designer. That's the whole trick, right? Is just, we got to take these games that we can explain and then write them down and make them explainable in words and pictures. That was a big challenge with Polyversal because it's complex. It's not just, here's our miniatures, here's some rules, go play. It's, here's our game rules, here's a storyline, and here's a design system. And by the way, you can use any miniature you want. So think about the scope of trying to make that work. And that's why it took 10 years, is because of the sheer scope of what we were trying to do. And I think what we ended up with is even beyond Ken's expectations. I mean, we've got an awesome app that works, that takes you 2 minutes to spit out a beautiful tile that you can play with right then. You can print it out and you're done. I mean, we've got artwork from, people that work with Hollywood studios. And James Messino, this helped propel his portfolio to where he was doing Super Bowl commercials. I mean, working on like matte paintings now for Super Bowl. It's like just awesome stuff. And he emailed me one day and he was like, what the portfolio of Polyversal has done is Lockheed, it may be hiring me to do some renderings of future weapons. Like, holy crap, that's pretty cool. And they saw the Polyversal art that helped him get that kind of in. So it's kind of neat. But digressing, whatever you call it. Yes, it's hard. It's hard to work with anyone who has a design completely fleshed out in their head, ready to explain it at a show, but go put it on paper and then go give it to people, and then do what we do with the design system and the whole sandbox aspect.
And still make it consumable as well, right? Because it's not just about getting the rules down on paper and making them understandable. They've got to be consumable as well, right? Because if it's going to take me 10 hours of gameplay, 20 hours of gameplay to work it out, these days that's too much for people. It goes on the bookshelf and they move on to the next thing. It needs to be,
That's development.
here's the rules, let me consume them. Here are the charts that you're using color-coded stuff to make it easier. So there's a lot of mnemonic type of things to help you understand, oh yeah, I need a red die, I need an orange die, I need this die. And that speeds up the gameplay. And that takes thought, and it's not just designer genius, it's a lot of developer work as well. Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, and Ken had a lot of these, the color-coded dice, the damage system, and how you work out. With a single die roll, we resolve the combat. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, it's really cool. And without going into too much detail with that, because it's better to see it and see pictures and watch videos. But yeah, single die roll, and that was all worked out in the beginning by Ken. So he's done some great stuff. But the development takes that further and says, okay, well, we're fielding units. So one example is the battle groups were something, the hexagonal tiles were something that I came up with, because I wanted to, how do we show this organization and how do we give orders without putting chits out all over the miniatures table? Because that's one thing that aggravates me is there's all these little tokens everywhere. We keep all that tracking off the board, which is kind of cool, and you get to focus on the models. So yeah, development comes into play with any, I think, well-done game. You can tell if it was developed or not the first time you play it, and how much refinement it will show or not.
That's the worst thing when you look at a game and you're like, you start playing it, you set it up, and you're like, okay, well, the setup's not even working right. All right, well, I maybe they meant to put him here, and then you set everything up, and you start playing, you're like, did anybody even develop this did anybody look at it besides look at the rules and say, yeah, we'll print it? We've all seen games like that.
There is nothing more frustrating than going through the rules, reading all the rules, and going, okay, I think I got it. Okay. You start putting stuff out and go, oh, hang on a second. There's 2 RPGs missing and a tank missing, and this hex isn't on this board. Put it back in a box. I'll deal with that the next time around.
I'll tell you what. I think what some of the developers miss is they forget that when the game comes out, it needs to be formatted in such a way that a layman can pick up that rule book, read it, understand the game, and play it after they've read the rule book. That they forget that they understand it innately. They designed it, they developed it, they did all that, so they'll forget to pass on certain aspects because to them it's just natural knowledge. They know that, and they're expecting the player to know something that they don't know. You have to lay it out as Barney style as you can for everyone, and you can't assume that the person has war game experience or miniatures experience, because this could be the first game they're picking up. And if it is, they still need to be able to pick up that rule book and read it and understand it.
There are ways that things, because I've been on both sides of this, where I've been critical of it and then I've been a victim of it as well. So there are pieces along the way that can break. You can, as a developer, you can say, okay, here's a scenario, here's a setup, and then you send it, and then the wrong file gets used, and then you're like, oh crap, that's not the right file.
Oh, sure. It's never perfect.
Yeah. There's always mistakes, but a lot of people don't. Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of effort that goes into it. And, it's something that it's tough. And in your, situation, you were doing a lot of this yourself, and that's where the struggle was for you. And then you brought in a team of people to help you, which was great.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you need a team, really. I mean, Carl Olson, for example, helped significantly with graphics. Even Bruno gave some graphic feedback, even though his job was the concept art, the art. I went to him and said, hey, what should I do here? I'm stuck on this symbol or whatever. And then Carl ended up fleshing out. He designs UIs for a living, which is cool. So we're writing medical UI programming, and he offers. I mean, we actually met at Historicon. He said, hey, I think I could do an app. And I'm like, okay, that's cool, because we were just going to do templates and a spreadsheet. But yeah, okay. And he took that on and did it all himself, made it open source, which is cool. And it works. And I sent you guys a link. If you want to play around in it, you can get in there free. It's just register and you can get in there and see how cool it is.
Nice.
Very, very self-explanatory. But it's, yeah, I mean, stuff like that just kind of reveals, it comes up along the way. I mean, you don't even, when we launched the Kickstarter, I didn't know what the final product would totally look like. I mean, I really didn't. You don't, because it is a project. It's not a pre-order.
Yeah.
You know, so it's we don't use Kickstarter as a pre-order system. It is a project, and and yeah, I suck on estimating timeframes. I'll be honest. I'm not good at that. And here we are, still not completely delivered, but at the same time, I've seen some great feedback from backers who have stuck in there. And, you know, I've found that as long as you communicate with what is going on and what you're doing, what you're waiting on, what you're developing, what you're working on, and include backers, then that one, they appreciate it and they know it's not some vacuum or vaporware.
Right.
And you just show progress. If you show progress, for the most part, people are satisfied. So that's been key to keeping this from becoming Robotech Tactics, you know, which was not very well done as far as making backers happy. And people are still burnt by that. So anyway, and unfortunate, but
well, you got John interested enough. He said he pre-ordered the basic set. Thanks for the information.
Thank
you.
You.
He says it's bad on his wife for not enforcing his 8 p.m. bedtime.
That's great.
Awesome.
So John will be checking that out for sure. And, you know, it'll be great to get some feedback, you know, from him as well, you know, in you know, coming weeks, you know, on the show and stuff like that, talking about it. And what do you have as far as, do you have any other box sets or units or, you know, armies or however you want to call them, task forces and future scenarios that you're going to be adding on to the game aside from what you already have?
So, I mean, the initial release is basically the box set with two, you know, battle groups. One is a UN and one is an OP4.
Yeah. But
there's 3 expansions off the bat at the same time. One is a UN expansion, one is an OP4 expansion, and one is a mercenary expansion. Yeah. So all 5 of those groups really work, you know, right away. I mean, you can get some pretty good amount of forces that are different out on the table. With every one of those has tiles developed. So I mean, all of them with full concept art depicting the miniature, fleshed out, designed, balanced, and they work together in the battle group. So, and in each one of those groups is 750 points when fielded as a standard unit. So, so that's what we've got now. We also have, you know, just the electronic version. If you want to just check out the rules in the app, you can do that. So a lot of people just already have huge collections of miniatures, and that's a big draw for this game, is you can use all that. So a lot of people will just get the rules, and that's totally cool. We just want you to play the game. So it's not my primary mission to push miniatures, because again, I don't make them.
How about a campaign system?
Oh gosh, we're talking near a far future. I'm still trying to flesh out the scenarios. So what I'm working on right now is, and it'll be released as a separate booklet from the rule book, is a scenario book with 18 scenarios, like I mentioned. And I'm writing fiction for each one, and still fleshing some of that out. You know, mostly focusing right now on getting the printed goods done, working with the printer and all that stuff, the kind of the last step for the Kickstarter deliveries. And then I really get into fiction scenarios, and that'll be an e-release booklet for everybody to, you know, take the existing box set units and go play with them. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on with it right now. As far as future, I don't know. I would love to do some more battle group expansions. Don't know what they look like yet. I don't even know what companies we would work with. I mean, we have the option to work with anyone, which is cool. Anyone who will work with us. So that's kind of neat that, and of course, supporting our initial partners, we'll probably be doing that again. Especially, you know, Brigade and Plaza Blast and Microworld. Those guys have been all great. You know, and easy to work with. And Plasma Blast games, just incredible stuff. The quality of their models are just incredible. And you know, so I hope to work with them again on maybe another battle group. And I think what I'll do, if we do expand it with more battle groups with miniatures and tiles, what I'm going to do this time, because now we don't have to flesh out an entire game. We don't have to flesh out the app. We don't have to do all this other stuff that we've had to do over the past years of work. We can just go at it, and I've got, you know, all the graphic designs done. All those, I can just make tiles. I can make, and he can make the models, whoever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And we put them together and put them on a Kickstarter and get a battle group out. And so I hope to do those. And at the same time, you know, Kickstarter is another chance to get in front of the audience, and potentially new members of that audience, new sci-fi people, whatever. And so we get to reintroduce the game again on Kickstarter, which is big, and give people the chance to, hey, go grab the rules if you missed it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, some more battle groups would be the plan, I think, for now.
Very cool.
And Matt was asking, can you play the rules with a hex map and counters like the THW, the 2-hour war game rule sets?
I don't know.
Have you not tried playing with counters?
I'm not familiar with the THW stuff, so I can't answer. Mo,
Okay.
you probably know better.
Yeah, I mean, 2-hour war games basically uses counters or in place of miniatures, but in this instance, the miniatures are tied into the tiles. So if you create a tile and you have a counter, and you know that the counter is, you know, this is this tank. Well, okay, yeah, you can use a counter instead of the miniature, but you're just, the only thing you're cheating yourself out of then is at least in my opinion, would be the visual appeal of the game.
Sure.
Because nothing beats miniatures when it comes to visual appeal. It's just, they're beautiful on the table.
But yeah, you could do that. Yeah.
Then John asks, have you seen Scale 75 Fallen Frontier game? The miniatures are perfection, but they're 32 millimeters.
32 is a bit large.
Yeah. So that would still be playable.
Above the scale for this, but I mean, you could do it, but
need a big area.
You need a big area for it. Yeah. I like the stuff that's been coming out from Strato Minis, Strato Minis. They make some really good looking stuff. They're posted all over. And the 6 millimeter groups and stuff like that. Really sharp stuff. Strato Mini Studio or something. I forgot exactly where they're out of, but really nice looking stuff. Mostly resin, I think.
I think Kev's taking some notes here. Do some research
for later.
I knew it.
I'm writing down all these mini company names and all this stuff. Next thing it'll be up airbrush.
Kev's been kind of dabbling with the idea of miniatures. You know, when I think it was MBT you played recently, where you use the minis in place, and you're kind of like, I want to go, but I don't want to go. And the thing about it is, you know, I can just see you're inching closer and closer to the falling into the abyss. And the next thing you know is Kev's gonna, you know, it's just going to be a week-long thing of Kev going, I got another box of minis. I got another box of minis. Next thing you know, he's going to have like 2,000 miniatures on his table and going like, oh, what did I get myself into? We've all been there.
There's a reason it's called plastic crack.
Yeah, it definitely is good stuff. But yeah, it's a lot of fun and pretty cool. And, you know, the BattleTech set that is coming out, you know, I think summer or fall, they're going to be going out in waves, so you can use those miniatures using this system if you wanted to. The cab we talked about, as well as a 6 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 15 millimeter. There's a whole bunch of different sizes, you know, or scales, I should say, at different, you know, manufacturers that make them. So you can make the game your own, you know, using what you have or what you want to order, which is what I think is really cool about the flexibility of the system. And it has a very war game feel. In a miniature system, but streamlined. Whereas some miniatures are, they can be a little, clunky, a little fiddly. This is definitely pretty elegant.
Thanks.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to try it out. Where did you? You said you sent the link to Mo.
It's in the private chat.
Oh, on the
It's in the
private
chat.
Private chat.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Private
Yeah,
chat.
you can get into Arsenal anytime. Just register and play around in there. Make a unit. I even was challenging people at Adepticon. I said, challenge me to make something. And so, and somebody said, Godzilla. I said, okay, I got you. And I had the app up. I said, okay. And I Google searched an image for Godzilla. And it was like a toy one or whatever. And I just fed it into the app, called it a walker, and made it a colossal, and gave it a very good assault ability. I mean, you decide these different things. Weapons, I can't remember what I did there, but and anyway, in about a minute, I showed him a tile of Godzilla, and he's like, "Okay, you sold me." It's like, okay,
Well, that's
great.
a cool
That's
thing.
awesome. Good for you. Yeah.
That's the cool thing about it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kev. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say the same thing. That's the cool thing about it, right?
Well, I was going to say the cool thing about the software is that there are a lot of games out there, like I was saying, BattleTech Cap, things like that have readouts, the TROs, the technical readouts, and then army lists and stuff for, Flames of War or whatever. You can get a lot of the stats that'll help you put that information into Arsenal, which will then translate it into this game. So you don't have to just pull it out of your head and say, well, my interpretation of this is this. Like, well, you have a basis that you can work from based off of an army list or a source book or whatever, or you can just pull it out of your head. So it doesn't matter, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, Flames of War would be the right scale for this, wouldn't it?
You could. Flames is 15, and you could.
Oh, is it 15?
Mm-hmm. Well, 6 to 15 is what we say for the system. Mm-hmm. You can go above that if you want, or it's just the bigger the models, the more man-to-man combat it becomes, I think, and it's really meant to have more of a mass feel to it.
Which is, something I actually wanted to mess around with would be on the tactical level, having a squad on squad of, standalone miniatures, individual, like 25 millimeter or something like that, and just, stat them out and play it. That would be kind of neat.
Yeah, you might. I mean, I don't know how it would work because we don't get so detailed. That's the other thing, is that the bigger the models, the more detailed you get with, okay, what weapon is it carrying? What version of the weapon is it carrying? What does he?
Well, you can still keep it basic. You just say, okay, this guy's carrying an M16A4. He's got some frags, and just leave it at that. I mean, and just play it simple like that. You don't have to or say this guy's got an AK-47 and RPG and like one frag or something like that. You can keep it simple.
You could probably do it. Yeah, make some tiles up and give it a shot. And I'm not going to say, me and Ken aren't going to say, hey, don't do that. I mean, it's your game. Polyversal.
So you can stat out all of your tanks now that you want to buy, Kev.
There you go.
Stop. He's like, stop. Don't enable me.
Well, I mean, he does have a point. I've already got a stack of minis that are waiting to be painted right now that I'll never get around to actually finishing. I'm still working on vampires that I showed you weeks ago, and I paint on that just a little bit each evening, trying to catch up. If I add this to it, I'll never see the wife again.
That's great.
John's talking about Napoleonics here. He's got a thing for Napoleonics, and DCB's telling Kev, take the jump. You like Napoleonics. I recommend 40 millimeter scale. Same for AWI. So everybody seems to have a miniature, obsession of their own here. But I think, anybody that's into miniatures games, if you like the combined arms and you like a military sci-fi feel, this is definitely something to, check out. And, while we're going to close out here, but Byron, go ahead and tell everybody the link. I think I already posted up there. It's Polyversal-game.
Polyversal-game.
Yeah. So, and then where they can see you on Twitter and ask you any questions, it's CE Wargames.
Yep, CE Wargames. And then we've got a really active Facebook group. Not the page. The page is the page, but the Facebook group is where a lot of the players are gathering and joining, and I think we're up to like 370 right now, and
Nice.
People are really getting into it and posting designs, asking questions. So questions about rules, posting what you're working on. Join us there, because it's a good little community growing right now already.
Cool.
So you can find us there.
Very cool. Very cool.
Outstanding. Well,
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you being on, Byron. And like I said before, I just want to say it again. I really appreciate everything you did for everybody with the COVID stuff, with Spearpoint sending out over 30 copies of that game. I think that's pretty awesome. Everybody should give a round of applause, virtual round of applause for Byron and Collins Epic Wargames on that. That's pretty fantastic.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Good luck with everything, man.
Thanks a lot, Kev. Thanks.
Yeah,
Nate.
definitely. And Nate, I know you are a big minis guy too, so you'll like it too.
Oh, I'm trying to stay quiet because I have no idea how good my internet connection is right now. I don't want to butcher things.
It's been going up and down.
I've dropped out like twice. Right now, I'm operating off my phone, so
it's solid. You're actually really solid right now.
Am I a lot better than it was? This is so bad that my phone is better than my internet connection. This is pissing me off.
Oh, that happens.
I will say, though, I've been kind of mulling at the back of my head that I think it could actually even fit as far back as Napoleonics.
Oh, gosh. I don't know.
Seriously, think about it. Instead of vehicles, you got cavalry. Instead of artillery, you got cannons, which are relatively the same. Still got infantry.
Well, there is cavalry in the game, so you do have that. But it can be beast, and we say cavalry. It could be trikes, bikes, beast. So yeah, you would call it a beast. And primitive on the technology. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I won't say it won't work, but it's more. The weapons are more centric to sci-fi.
Who's to say laser rifle, musket?
Laser musket.
Laser musket.
How about an alternative history Napoleonics?
There you go.
Hey, there you go. Like, was it steampunk Napoleonics?
Yeah, there you go.
Right. A plasma musket.
Star Commander Sharp. That would be kind of cool. You can bring Richard Sharp into the future and kind of do a little crossover. That would be kind of neat, But I'm really looking forward to seeing the finished product when everything's out. And I know everybody here seems to be pretty excited about it as well. We got John; he's got it, and it's past his bedtime. And this is what happens when you keep people up past their bedtime; they go buy things. So. That's a good thing. And like I said, John, you need to report back over the coming weeks as to what your experiences with it and what your thoughts are on the game system, because we'd like to hear from people that buy these games from when they see them on the show, what they think about it. But thanks again, Byron, for coming in. We really appreciate it. And Nate, why don't you tell everybody where everybody can find you at online?
YouTube, thegimpygamer.com. That's it. I'm on Facebook on my name. So not Twitter. I avoid Twitter like the plague.
Twitter's fun, man.
Twitter sucks.
You just have to know what to pay attention to.
I hate Twitter. I've always hated Twitter.
And Kev, where can everybody find you at?
Joe, bigboardgaming.com, somewhere, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, your sister's ass. I'm there.
And if you guys want to see any great video content, go see Nate's boot camp videos. He does a lot of great boot camp videos, a lot of review throughs, a lot of playthroughs, and gives you a really good look at a lot of games. Kev does a tremendous amount of work on different games all the time. I mean, this guy's a machine. He cranks out so many videos, it's not even funny. But Deadly Northern Lights is the latest one that he's been working on. That's that big monster game I was talking to you about, Byron, earlier. And there's a lot of stuff to check out with that. And so definitely give these guys a look and check out Collins Epic Wargames as well. And appreciate you guys for tuning in tonight, and look forward to seeing you on the next broadcast. Good night, everybody.
Thanks a lot, guys.